After decided of waiting in the wing, Anwar Ibrahim has been appointed Malaysia Prime Minister. His appointment is the result of a decided long political journey that saw him almost elected to the job not once but twice. He was imprisoned for years under the leadership of political titan Mahathir Mohamad, who was also Mr. Anwar's one-time mentor. The roller coaster relationship between the two men will come to define not only Mr. Anwar's fortune but also Malaysian politics and Mr. Anwar's place in it. Rapid ascent. Mr. Anwar, now 75 years, first made his name as a charismatic, firebrand student leader who founded Malaysia Islamic Youth Movement (ABIM). He surprised many by joining the United Malay National Organization (UMNO), the long ruling party in 1982. But it proved a canny political move. He climbed rapidly up the political ladder and had multiple ministerial posts. In 1993, he became Mr. Mahathir Deputy and was widely expected to succeed him. But the tension set in after the ASEAN financial crisis of 1997 as they clashed over the economy and corruption. In September 1998, Mr. Anwar was sacked and led public protests against Mr. Mahathir. It was the start of reformasi, a reform movement that would influence a generation of Malaysian democracy activists. Mr. Anwar was arrested and eventually charged with sodomy and corruption, charge he denied in the controversy trial that followed. While Muslim majority Malaysia criminal homosexual activity, conviction are rare and the case against Mr. Anwar was internationally condemned as political motivated. Violent street protests erupted when he was jailed for 6 years for corruption. A year later, he was sentenced to 9 years for sodomy. Mr. Anwar has always maintained the charge we part of smear campaign to remove his political threat to Mr. Mahathir. In late 2004, a year after Mr. Mahathir stepped down as Premier, Malaysia Supreme Court overturned the sodomy conviction and freed Mr. Anwar from jail. A growing opposition new charge. Upon his release, he emerged as the de facto head of a newly invigorated opposition that registered a strong showing in 2008 election. But claim of sodomy we again made against Mr. Anwar in 2008 in what he said was another attempt by the government to sideline him. A High Court eventually cleared Mr. Anwar of the charge in January 2012, citing a lack of evidence. The following year, he led the opposition to new head in election that delivered what was ever showing for the ruling Barisan Nasional Coalition. But once of Mr. Anwar, ambition was thwarted as he was preparing to fight a state election in 2014. His early execution was overturned and he was sent back to jail. Politics comeback. In a shock turn of events in 2016, his former rival Mr. Mahathir announced he was coming out of retirement to run for top office again. The then 92 years old said he was sick of the corruption allegation plaguing the then Prime Minister, another former protest Najib Razak. But to stage his comeback, Mr. Mahathir struck an unlikely deal with the still imprisoned Mr. Anwar, who had remained hugely popular with opposition supporters. In a March public moment the two exchanged a once unthinkable handshake, marking the start of extraordinary political reunion. Mr. Mahathir led the Pakatan Harapan Alliance to victory in 2018 landmark election, ending Barisan Nasional unbroken 60 years streak in ruling the country. The new Pakatan Harapan coalition well together for party into Malaysia, first truly multi-ethnic coalition the Kumin supported among the Malay Muslim majority as well the country's sizable Chinese and Indian minorities. As Malaysia Prime Minister As Malaysian Prime Minister once again, Mr. Mahathir made his pledge to free Mr. Anwar from prison, initiating a full pardon. He also indicated he will hand power to Mr. Anwar within 2 years. Malaysian election, why isn't there a government yet? But the alliance began to look precious as the nonagenarian keep shifting the goal spot for handing over power. It began to unravel amid bitter infighting over succession and resurgence of Malay nationalism. In February 2020, Mr. Mahathir unexpected resignation led to the coalition collapse, plunging Malaysia into an unprecedented period of political turmoil and leaving Mr. Anwar empty-handed once again. After the new government crumbled, UMNO was brought back into power and Muhyiddin Yassin was named the new Prime Minister. But just over a year later, the peak of pandemic, Mr. Muhyiddin resigned after the tumultuous few months that saw him lose majority support in parliament. In October 2022, his successor, UMNO Ismail Sabri Yaakob, announced snap election. UMNO was convinced by a string of by-election win that they could regain power. Instead, Mr. Anwar Pakatan Harapan Alliance emerged with the most seats, although still short of a simple majority needed to form a government. And after day of deadlock, the country king announced Mr. Anwar appointment, the culmination of a 20 years long wait. But the roads ahead is still one that will feel what challenge for Mr. Anwar, who must knit together a workable governing coalition and will undoubtedly face difficult in his promotion of a more pluralistic, inclusive Malaysia in the face of rising Islamic in Malaysia.